Welcome back once again to Between Two FARS. I'm Warneke Miller here once again with Bob Tepfer, and we have been talking about the different contract types and their risks and benefits. Today we're going to talk about cost contracting. Bob, simply put, what is the definition of a cost contract?
Well, a cost contract is where the allocable, allowable, and reasonable costs that are spelled out, in FAR 31 and throughout the contract itself are, an entitlement to the contractor. And it's a method of contracting where the risk is such that the folks are not certain what the reasonable cost would be at the inception. They just don't know. It may not have been done before. They may be searching for a level of excellence on something that has been done before, or it may result in integration issues or government property issues that they cannot necessarily foresee and the delays that could come. But when it's initially negotiated, they try to sit down and say what's reasonable to assume, and they pick a point, a dollar amount, but above and below that, that has a kind of a fluid element that there may result in changes. And so the issue is more of negotiating the associated fee in that context.
All right. What would you say is the generalized benefit that the government would get from using a cost contract? Why do we use them?
Well, a lot of times contractors, if you're not careful, if you choose a fixed price environment, they will sit down and they will calculate the worst case scenario, where it's called a contingency. The reason why they do that, and this upsets a lot of folks, is they have to stay in business. If they don't, it could drop below what they proposed in a fixed price world, and that's a loss. They lose their profit, and effectively they have to keep working and pay the associated costs associated with it, because in a fixed price environment, it's very rigid. And we don't want to pay the worst case scenario. So what we do is we try to figure out something in the middle, and we say that if it's fluid goes up, we'll pay those allowable, allocable, reasonable costs. If it goes below, we'll try to incentivize you to go below, but then that's all we're going to pay.
So we're not paying for the worst case scenario. That's a pretty good benefit.
Yeah.
How about the greatest risk? What is the biggest risk that we face with cost contract?
Well, you can lose track of the cost. There could be a contractor that just keeps using inefficient methods that costs go up and we're obligated to pay them. There's things you can do, particularly in the context of past performance. You may have different fee provisions in there that where we, and I'll go over those types of contracts where you can not penalize, because we're not allowed to penalize a contract, but we don't pay as much fee. And then those kinds of approaches where we try to incentivize it. But that's pretty much all we've got. They can hurt themselves fee-wise, and that can not look good on their past performance record.
All right, well, let's talk about fee, because that's a very important contracting, and there are different types of fees. So let's run through them and kind of define what each fee is and what the benefit would be. So let's start with a fixed fee. What is the definition of a fixed fee?
Well, okay, normally in a cost plus fixed fee approach is you negotiate what you reasonably think the cost will be, and you put that number down, and then you might say, what's a good return on your money, acknowledging that you're not as much risk because you are going to get allocable, allowable, reasonable costs. So you're not taking as much risk, so we're not going to pay as much fee. You take the number that you think the cost will be, and you multiply, maybe 8% against the amount of that, and you say, okay, we're now going to begin the work. And a contractor has a unique opportunity for management to look good to shareholders, the owners, whatever, because if they can get that cost down, they can elevate it above 8% with that fixed fee. All of a sudden, the fee is a greater percentage of the actual costs that are incurred, allowable, allocable, and reasonable costs.
Now, you've used the term 8%, but there is no magic number for a
No.
fixed fee. It depends on the type of work that's being done and risk associated with it, right?
Absolutely, but if there's less risk, there should be less fee. And
That makes
and
sense.
let's say hypothetically, and I chose that initially, there's 8%, but you can get that cost down below the number you negotiated. You can make it for 12%. You
Because
look
it's
good
fair.
on your return on what you
Right.
did, and that incentivizes them to be more efficient, incentivizes them to get innovation in how they perform the work, and we like that because it saves us money and they look better.
All right. Well, how about an incentive fee? What is an incentive fee? How do you define that?
Okay, an incentive fee is what you're communicating to the contractor is we worry about costs a lot. In fact, we worry about it so much that if it goes above a certain target number and you negotiate a target up front, again, as to what you want, and the contractor believes that the cost will actually be. If it comes in under that, you share in a percentage of the savings and you negotiate that share ratio. Or if it goes above that target dollar amount, you don't get as much fee. Normally, you have a maximum amount of fee in case they figure out some innovative way to come well under target, and you have a minimum amount of fee in case the costs are well beyond what we're negotiating. You have to understand that if it goes above the target, that's not necessarily mean the contractor is doing a bad job, because that's why you chose that type of contract to begin with. You didn't know what the costs would be. If you knew what the costs were, and historically you've done them in the past, you would have chosen a fixed price, hopefully. Okay, so it floats and everything, but what the main element that you're telling the contractor is we're focused on costs. Okay, if you can figure out a cheap way to do this, do it. And also it almost suffers a little bit from the same things that a fixed price environment. They're going to construe it cheaply. If you want to make it more, they're going to say that's not what we negotiated. You're going to have to effectively move the target cost element up, because otherwise you're adding things that I was not obligated to do, and it's costing me more, and that's taking away from my fee.
What about an award fee? How would you define an award fee?
Okay, an award fee is, program directors love that. You have the award fee plan, and routinely, it has certain standards. It even can have cost elements in it where it says if costs in this area go up too much, that's a bad thing, and award fee will be handed out, in a certain manner. The award fee plan has to be taken very seriously. Why? Because contractors are actually reading it. Okay, they're going to do the kinds of things to the standard that you said you wanted. You communicated that to them, but occasionally you'll see some award fee plan which is kind of vague and ambiguous, and what that's really saying, although lawyers don't necessarily like it as much, is it's saying make the program director happy in this area. Okay,
and how are these award fee plans evaluated?
Though the award fee plans are difficult to evaluate. You mean is what we do, or ultimately during the administration?
During the administration, how do we measure whether or not they're meeting the award fee requirements?
We'll have, individuals in the program office in their narrow areas provide an evaluation, and that is sent up to the program director, and the program director will accumulate that, and they have a board that meets. Those individuals may have an opportunity to comment if they're asked questions. The director will have an opportunity to comment if they have questions. They have to be detailed. It's a rather thorough process, takes a lot of time, a lot of thought goes into it. And because of that, a lot of folks don't like award fee type of contracts because they're very labor intensive.
And that sounds like labor intensive both on the contractor side and on the government side, right?
Absolutely. It's much more labor intensive than a lot of different contracts from the government side, because the record keeping becomes very intense and folks want to know. And so folks are taken away from their jobs where they're actually looking at things and doing things, putting together the evaluations and making certain that they can answer the question. Sometimes they move boards from like 6 months to a year because they want to have less intensity. And sometimes we've even gone so far as to create an option where we have to tell them at the creation of the contract that we may go from an award fee to perhaps a fixed fee at some point in time, where if the performance is excellent, well into the 90s, and we decide, you know what, we don't have to have these boards meet routinely, generate all this paperwork, then subsequently answer questions and put all this together. It's exclusively, if it's written right, at the government's discretion, because any option is the unilateral right of the government. And then the performance may have a trigger. It may have to be in the 90s for a certain period of time. And if for whatever reason, and it may be spelled out or it may be a little bit more discretionary, we can switch back.
Okay. Now, award fee is important to the contractor because it's not just money, is it? How does it impact their past performance?
It becomes a key player in past performance. And that's why it has to be considered very, very carefully. Because if for some reason in one area they do really, really well, and another area is just kind of satisfactory, we guess, you're creating a record. And you're generating that record, which will play a key role later. And if you inflate it for some reason to give them, you want to really reward them because of performance in this area. So if you were not to be realistic, you can distort subsequent past performance evaluations on subsequent competitions, which is not a good thing. It distorts the evaluation.
Now, if you were talking to clients about the costs and benefits and risks between these different types of fee arrangements, is there anything in general that you would tell them to be considering or thinking about?
Yeah, I would be, my tendency is in the cost plus incentive fee arrangement is to be very sensitive to the fact that you're communicating to the contractor, and the contractor is going to listen to what you're saying. And if you're saying, I really, really care about cost, maybe you don't care about cost in some areas as much because there's safety considerations, okay? So perhaps you might have some aspects that are cost plus incentive fee, which you might not want to go completely because you might want to, let the contractor do a study and do something that may cost you more money, but it's in everybody's best interest. So be very careful at every stage of knowing that what you're saying, they're listening to.
Terrific. I really appreciate this insight on just the basics of cost contracting. And we'll continue this series in our next episode, where we're going to talk about variable quantity contracts, IDIQ contracts. So join us again next time between two FARS.